What do you think
Imagine
you're doing?
planting a simple
Hey,
flower
whoa, get
garden in your own
both
front
sides.
yard.
Just
Bright
enjoying
roses,
the
cheerful
sunshine,
daisies, and
my
a small
dear.
fountain to bring life to your home. Now imagine getting slapped with hundreds of dollars in fines by your HOA just because they thought your garden was unsightly. That's exactly what happened here. But instead of giving in, this homeowner flipped the script and turned her yard into something so wild, so untamable, that the HOA never saw it coming. It all began with something innocent. The homeowner had always loved flowers and found joy in the small act of planting seeds, watering them, and watching them bloom. Her front yard wasn't extravagant, just a modest patch of soil that she decided to brighten with marigolds, tulips, and a few climbing vines near her porch. Neighbors walking by often complimented her on the splash of color, saying, "It brought life to the otherwise uniform row of beige houses that lined the street." But not everyone shared that appreciation. The HOA board, notorious for micromanaging even the smallest details, took issue with the new garden. They claimed the flowers violated the uniformity clause of the neighborhood's bylaws. To them, anything that stood out from the manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges was unacceptable. Soon enough, the first letter arrived in her mailbox, a warning that her garden was non-compliant. At first, she laughed it off. Surely they couldn't seriously object to a few flowers, but the tone of the letters quickly escalated. What started as a warning turned into threats of fines, and within weeks, she was facing hundreds of dollars in penalties for simply daring to grow something different. The absurdity of it all lit a fire inside her. If the HOA wanted a battle, they were about to get one. Most people, when faced with mounting fines and legal threats, would have given up. Many homeowners in the neighborhood had caved before, repainting their houses, cutting down trees, or even ripping out fences just to satisfy the HOA's endless demands. But this homeowner wasn't like most people. She wasn't going to let a group of power-hungry board members tell her what she could or couldn't plant in her own yard. Instead of removing her flowers, she began researching the HOA's bylaws. She read every line, every clause, every vaguely worded section, and there, buried deep in the legal jargon, she found her weapon. While the HOA had strict rules about maintaining lawns, nowhere did it explicitly forbid gardens. In fact, the bylaws made no mention at all of landscaping beyond grass height and yard maintenance. That loophole sparked an idea, a bold, almost outrageous plan. If they thought her little flower bed was unsightly, what would they do when she transformed her entire yard into something so wild, so colorful, and so overwhelming that it made her original garden look tame by comparison? The decision was made. She wasn't going to fight the HOA with lawyers or appeals. She was going to fight them with plants. The transformation began quietly. Trips to local nurseries became frequent, and soon the yard filled with bags of soil, mulch, and seeds from all over the world. Instead of just flowers, she began planting towering ferns, thick hedges, and exotic plants that spread quickly. She added creeping vines that climbed up her porch, giving the house a mysterious, overgrown look. Neighbors watched curiously as her front yard changed week by week. What had once been a neat, grassy plot was now alive with wild textures and colors. Hummingbirds darted between flowers, butterflies landed on giant leaves, and the sound of trickling water came from a small pond she installed near the walkway. The HOA, of course, noticed. Another letter arrived, this time accusing her of creating a nuisance. But she knew the rules, and this time she was ready. Everything was technically within her rights. The grass was trimmed where it still existed. The pathways were clear, and nothing violated the official regulations. The jungle may have looked overwhelming, but legally, there was nothing they could do. As summer turned to fall, the jungle grew, denser. Sunflowers towered above the fence line. Ivy crawled along the mailbox, and lush greenery made her home look like something out of a tropical paradise. What had begun as defiance turned into a full-blown passion project, and the more the HOA pushed back, the more determined she became. It wasn't long before the HOA escalated the fight. Board members began showing up unannounced, snapping photos of her yard, scribbling notes on clipboards, and leaving more warning letters taped to her door. They held meetings about her property, claiming her jungle lowered the aesthetic value of the neighborhood. But behind their polished language, it was clear they hated that she had beaten them at their own game. Other neighbors started to take sides. Some loved the jungle, saying it broke the monotony of identical lawns and made the street feel more alive. Others, perhaps pressured by the HOA, complained that it looked messy or uncontrolled. But whether people loved it or hated it, nobody could ignore it. The jungle had become the talk of the neighborhood. The HOA tried everything. They filed petty complaints about weeds, noise from her water fountain, and even claimed her plants attracted undesirable wildlife. But every attempt failed. She had done her homework, and she always responded with evidence, pointing to the bylaws that allowed her landscaping choices. By winter, it was clear the HOA had lost the battle, but they weren't ready to admit defeat. Their frustration only fueled her desire to go even bigger. The turning point came when a neighbor posted photos of her yard online. What started as a local Facebook post quickly spread to larger groups, and soon her home was being shared across social media. People were fascinated by the story of a homeowner who turned HOA harassment into a living jungle. Comments flooded in, praising her creativity and mocking the HOA's obsession with control. Local news outlets picked up the story, calling her the Jungle Warrior and showcasing her yard on TV. Suddenly, she wasn't just a homeowner fighting back. She was a symbol of defiance against overreaching HOAs everywhere. Messages of support poured in from strangers who had faced similar battles, many of whom admitted they wished they had fought back the way she did. Ironically, the attention made the HOA look worse. Their attempts to fine and intimidate her backfired, painting them as bullies trying to stamp out individuality. Board members became the subject of ridicule, while her jungle became a point of pride for the entire neighborhood. The more the story spread, the more determined she was to keep her yard thriving. She expanded the pond, added a winding stone path, and even installed solar lights that made the jungle glow at night. What began as revenge had blossomed into a masterpiece. By the following spring, the HOA had all but surrendered. They no longer sent letters, and their visits stopped entirely. The jungle had grown beyond their control, literally and figuratively. Trying to force her to remove it would have sparked a community-wide backlash they couldn't handle. Her victory wasn't just personal. Other homeowners in the neighborhood, inspired by her success, began experimenting with their own yards. Soon, rows of identical lawns were dotted with wildflowers, small gardens, and creative landscaping. What was once a rigid, colorless community now looked vibrant and alive. The HOA, once feared for its strict enforcement, lost much of its power. People realized that the board only held control as long as everyone complied. All it took was one determined homeowner, willing to stand up and find a loophole to prove that the HOA wasn't invincible. For her, the jungle became more than just revenge. It became a sanctuary, a reminder of her resilience and a living symbol of freedom. Where there had once been threats, fines, and hostility, there was now life, color, and peace. In the end, the story wasn't just about plants. It was about power, control, and the courage to stand against unfair authority. The HOA had tried to intimidate her into conformity, but instead they sparked something unstoppable. What began as a fight over flowers turned into a battle of wills, and she emerged victorious, not with anger or aggression, but with creativity, patience, and persistence. Her story became a reminder to anyone living under the thumb of controlling neighbors or HOA boards. Sometimes the best revenge is not direct confrontation, but finding a way to win on your own terms. By turning her yard into a jungle, she didn't just protect her rights, she inspired others to reclaim theirs. The jungle stood tall as proof that individuality could thrive, even in the most restrictive environments. And long after the HOA had given up, the vines kept climbing, the flowers kept blooming, and the sound of water trickling through the pond whispered the same message. No one can stop you from growing if you choose to thrive. Thank you for watching this incredible story of resilience and revenge. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe for more dramatic HOA and Karen tales, and share your thoughts in the comments below.